Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are unpacking a seriously fascinating, kind of darkly comedic, and honestly just profound case study on modern guilt and accountability. We're looking at the wild story of Clarence Late. Now, Clarence, he isn't some mastermind criminal. He's not a celebrity or a historical figure. Nope. He's literally just a 63-year-old retired insurance adjuster who went on what I can only describe as the most extreme apology tour in human history. Through his journey, we're going to look at how we process regret, how technology totally commodifies our healing, and the quite frankly terrifying reality of actually holding ourselves accountable.
Okay, let's dive into this by asking a really core question. What happens when you realize you might just be a terrible person? You know, it's an existential crisis most of us just shove way down deep, right? But for Clarence, this question didn't come from some dramatic near-death experience or massive moral failing. Actually, it was triggered by something so incredibly mundane, which really just goes to show how fragile our self-perception truly is.
So the whole crisis kicked off over a very specific amount of money, $4.99. Clarence was at a Costco in Arizona. He's got 2 golden rotisserie chickens in his cart. The cashier, a tired teenager, misses one of them and only charges him for a single chicken. And Clarence, well, he says absolutely nothing. He just walks right out. But by the time he gets to his car, the weight of this $4.99 theft just completely crushes him. His brain goes into an absolute spiral. He thinks, if I'm a thief, I'm broken. And if I'm broken, every single bad thing I've ever done in my entire life is suddenly connected in this one unbroken chain of just pure awfulness.
To cope with this overwhelming crisis, Clarence did what, let's be honest, a lot of us do when faced with unquantifiable, messy emotions. He tried to organize them into hard data. At 4:47 in the morning, he creates a Google sheet and calls it Project Mea Culpa. He starts listing literally everyone he has ever wronged, the year it happened, the specific offense, and he even calculates a percentage for the likelihood of their forgiveness. By the end of that day, he had documented 387 distinct moral failures spanning 56 years of his life. So naturally, he packs his bags.
Section 1. The Apologies, Facing the Past. And just like that, Clarence hits the open road. Armed with his laptop and this totally soul-crushing spreadsheet, he physically starts tracking down his victims. Let's just look at row number 1 on his list. Back in 2nd grade, Clarence audibly farted during silent reading and blamed it on a kid named Toby Miller. Cut to 52 years later, and Clarence actually tracks Toby down at an Office Depot to apologize for it. But there is a massive disconnect here. Clarence has been agonizing over this for decades. Toby, on the other hand, well, he had his entire childhood derailed by this. He became known as Toxic Toby, leaned hard into the persona, and actually had to go to therapy in his 30s to process the whole thing. But here's the absolute kicker. Toby already forgave Clarence in therapy 30 years ago. So this apology wasn't just unnecessary, it was actually super intrusive.
Right, so Toby didn't just reject this apology. He pointed out that Clarence reopening this ancient wound meant that Toby was going to have to talk about it in therapy all over again. So in this brilliant act of petty justice, Toby literally hands Clarence his therapist's business card and tells him to go apologize to her for creating more work. Toby perfectly summed up the whole situation with this realization. This is a loop, Clarence. Welcome to guilt. There's no exit. Toby is basically pointing out that you can't just check human beings off a list like a grocery run. Section 2. The Outsourcing and the Spectacle. And this brilliantly illustrates how modern technology commodifies our healing.
Because, of course, modern society has an app for everything now, right? Even our deepest, darkest regrets. Enter Life Ledger. This is an AI-powered guilt management platform that actually reached out to Clarence after buying his search data. Clarence, in a total moment of weakness, signs up. First, he agrees to a massive 47-page terms of service, which allows the AI to scan his entire digital footprint. We're talking emails, bank records, location history, the whole shebang. The result? The algorithm escalates his list from 387 wrongdoings to a staggering 1,247 people. And it even generates these AI-optimized apology scripts tailored to psychological best practices. I mean, no way, right?
So he tests it out on a woman named Sarah Kay. He ghosted her back in 1993. The AI writes this perfect, deeply poignant email and Clarence hits send. But, reality intervenes. Sarah replies that actually she ghosted him, and she even apologizes for calling him by the wrong name for 3 dates straight. The Life Ledger app immediately detects an infinite politeness loop and prompts Clarence to counter-apologize for making her apologize in the first place. It completely highlights the absolute absurdity of outsourcing genuine human connection to a machine.
And this absurdity just keeps building with another shocking encounter. Clarence tracks down Denise. This is a woman he spinlessly got fired from a water park way back in 1984. He's carried this heavy guilt for 40 years, completely convinced he ruined her life. But here is Denise's actual reality. Getting fired forced her to move, go back to school, and build an amazing life. Plus, she reveals she was actively embezzling $12,000 from that water park at the time, and getting fired is what stopped her. It just goes to show that we cannot control or even assume other people's narratives. Clarence's agonizing guilt was, frankly, entirely self-centered.
Now, through a random connection, Clarence's bizarre quest gets featured on this major wellness podcast called The Reckoning. And in just over 2 weeks, this deeply private, incredibly painful personal crisis gets digested by the internet and turned into a massive viral spectacle. Just look at this timeline. He goes from a podcast guest on day 1 to a trending hashtag on Twitter by day 3. By day 14, he's spawning performative copycats on TikTok. And by day 17, someone actually builds a crowdsourced website just tracking his every move. So, the crucial point is that the public's reaction completely strips Clarence of his personal agency. He just becomes a blank canvas for the public to project onto. You've got supporters calling him this brave hero, while critics are tearing him down as a performative narcissist. Confused acquaintances are reaching out asking if they're on the list, and completely random strangers start demanding apologies from him for reasons they make up. The internet basically turned his genuine attempt at atonement into a completely hollow spectator sport. This digital circus pushes Clarence right to his breaking point. He finally realizes that the spreadsheet, the app, the viral fame, absolutely none of it is actually making him feel any better.
Section 3. The Epiphany. Forced to finally look inward, Clarence experiences a massive psychological shift. Do you remember Toby's therapist, Dr. Rousseau? Well, when Clarence actually shows up to his appointment to apologize to her, she sees right through his massive spreadsheet. She delivers this devastating truth to him. She says, "You're not apologizing to these people, you're apologizing to yourself." She points out that the real problem isn't the 1,247 people he's wronged over his life. The problem is that Clarence fundamentally doesn't believe he is allowed to move on. A bit later, Clarence meets up with his ex-girlfriend Rachel, who happens to be a clinical psychologist now, and she gives his exact condition a name: ego-dystonic guilt. What this means is feeling guilty not because of the action itself, but because of what that action says about your core identity. So Clarence wasn't touring the country to heal other people. He was actually trapped in this endless loop of self-punishment because he hated who he was.
But you know, the final, most brutal piece of wisdom? It doesn't come from a doctor or some advanced algorithm. It comes from Brenda, a waitress at a Waffle House right outside Memphis at 2:47 in the morning. Clarence is totally exhausted, ready to just give up. He explains this impossible list to her, and she hits him with this incredible midnight observation. If you forgive yourself, you'll have to figure out what to do with the rest of your life. And that's scarier than apologizing. Wow. I mean, it's the ultimate truth, right? The guilt was acting as a shield, protecting him from the terrifying freedom of his own future.
So, sitting in that diner, Clarence opens up his laptop one more time. He scrolls past the hundreds and hundreds of names, past the coworkers, the ex-wives, the forgotten acquaintances, all the way down to the very final row of his spreadsheet, row 1247. The name? Clarence Late. The offense? Every single day. He changes the status to pending, packs his bags, and drives out to a secluded, totally off-the-grid cabin in the Ozarks to face the final boss of his apology tour.
Section 4. Forgiving the hardest person.
Up in that quiet cabin, stripped of the internet, the spreadsheets, and the dark comedy of the open road, Clarence is finally left with nothing but his own mind. For days, he just sits on the porch, staring at a blank document titled, "Apology to Myself." He screams into the woods. He dreams of his late father. And eventually, the dam breaks. He writes for hours, a 47-page letter to himself, culminating in this single, heartbreaking sentence: "I'm sorry I've never let you be enough."
And then, he types the words he has been running from for 63 years. "I forgive you, Clarence." He writes that it isn't because he's earned it. It's not some grand reward for checking off 1,247 boxes. No, he forgives himself because carrying that weight any longer would literally kill him. Forgiveness, he finally understands, isn't a prize for being perfect. It is a desperate, absolutely necessary mechanism for survival.
When Clarence finally leaves that cabin, he's a different man. He opens his phone and looks at his list again, and he just starts deleting the performative ones. The strangers in traffic, the baristas, the people who really don't need his closure.
He reduces this massive spreadsheet of 1,247 people down to just 87. 87 people who actually matter. People like his 89-year-old grandmother whom he had somehow forgotten to visit for a decade. He stops outsourcing his healing and he takes control of what's actually real.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought. I want you to look at your own life, your own regrets. Are we apologizing to genuinely heal the past, or are we, kind of like Clarence, just using guilt as a comfortable, familiar way to avoid figuring out what to do with the rest of our lives? It is definitely something to think about the next time you find yourself dwelling on a mistake. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.